Hello! I decided, because of a few beautiful things happening in my home right now, to do a video on African violets. You've probably heard of these, you probably know what they are, maybe you even have one in your home. Arguably they're the most popular flowering houseplant in the world. Why are they so popular? I don't know. I think it's because people hear from others that they're like one of the easiest houseplants to maintain, but I have to disagree. Saintpaulia Ionantha is the traditional Latin. They can be pretty temperamental. And I think if you want them to thrive, it's really not that simple. You should know, African violets, the common name, they aren't violets. They are from Africa though, so that part makes sense. They're just called African violets because they kind of resemble violets, but they're in the family Gesneriaceae. It's a family of flowering tropicals, roughly about 3,500 species. Let's start with the seeds. I've never grown an African violet from seed. I've never even seen an African violet seed. Most people propagate the plants with a cutting. You take a sharp knife and you cut diagonally, lower on the stem for the biggest surface area possible. And then you could dip it in a rooting hormone if you want, similar to this one. And then you plant it in rich compost, ideally. If the leaf doesn't die in a few weeks, you've probably succeeded. And you could actually even see flowers within about 6 months. That depends where you are and your sunlight conditions and time of year and yada 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 yada. Okay, let's talk roots. The roots of an African violet plant really don't need much space at all. Typically what I like to do is actually pull a plant out of its container for videos like this and show you this system. But you know what? These plants are, like I said, temperamental, and they're very delicate, and the root systems are very fibrous and fine. So if I were to pull this out, it'd probably be pretty upset. And it's doing so well right now, I'm not going to pull it out. The other thing that is really important to know is that the root system sort of grows outwards as opposed to down, like a lot of root systems. Your containers are really better off being quite shallow so they don't hold water in there. This plant doesn't like being overwatered, so the shallower the container, the better. Make sure there's drainage holes in your container. If you don't have holes in a container and it's a nice shallow container and you really want to use it, drill some or make some somehow. The foliage of this plant actually grows in a beautiful, what's called rosette. It's very compact, and that's actually a huge draw for some people, is its quaint little compact size. Another thing people will tell you to do if you want to keep it evenly growing, even if it's a little plant, is to rotate it regularly so it gets the same amount of sunlight all the way around. There's all different kinds of leaves, depending on the cultivar these days. There's round, heart-shaped, small, large. It's pretty crazy. And actually, this cultivar here kind of grows upward and has this weird kind of scalloped edge. It's a white flower. I've had it for like 5-6 years. Some people say that this upward growth means that the plant is not getting enough light, but this variety has always grown this way for me, so I actually think it's just this cultivar. I just wanted to mention that in case your African violet looks like this or is growing upward and you're worried, sometimes it's normal. The leaves are very fuzzy, hairy. The stems are fleshy and they will snap pretty easily. See, there goes one, bum bum bum, but I didn't want you to see that because you have to be very careful with them, not just the roots. The stems are also quite prone to breaking. And usually they'll have a purple underside. Some varieties don't, but these little miniature ones typically do. Beautiful veining. Dun, 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 dun. The flowers can be pink, white, red, blue, or, drumroll, violet. They can be single or double petals. There can be ruffled. They have sort of like an outline color, some of them. There's so many variants now, it's absurd. Now, they don't smell like anything, but their luster really makes up for it. You have to really look up close. They literally sparkle. Iridescence? Is that going too far? I don't think so. I almost personally recommend just like the simple white classic African violet to enjoy this luster. As far as fertilizer goes, you can fertilize. I'm not a huge fertilizer person. I have this for some reason, but I like to just use it like, I don't know, maybe once every 6 months, sometimes even just once a year, just because they're in pots and they don't have any nutrients coming in from the ground that they're supposedly supposed to be in. African violet fertilizer is typically really high in phosphorus because it encourages flowering. So, I mean, the box recommends to use it every time you water your African violet. And the idea is that it will just stay in bloom year-round. So you could try that. I've never really done that because I just like to let the plant do its thing. Let's talk watering, and then I have a cool story. So watering is easily overdone with African violets. You really don't want to overwater. The foliage and the stems and just the base of the plant are really susceptible to like mildewy fungal diseases. So actually most people recommend bottom watering, so that's why I have this plastic one inside a cup actually, and then I just put the water underneath and it soaks up as much as it needs. And then after about an hour I'll check in if there's any excess. I even dump that out because I don't want any water kind of sitting in there promoting any kind of mildew. You can buy these like fancy African violet pots that are really shallow and are sort of dual, so you have a base cup for the water and you can insert inside, but anything like this will do. I have this one in a bowl that I made. That's really bad pottery, so it comes in very useful for plants. So the classic recommendation for growing African violets is, like I said, minimal watering, bottom watering. They also like high humidity, most people will say. And then also bright indirect light, which I don't know. I ended up doing an experiment and I have some interesting discoveries that I have made. I live in a really dry, sunny zone, okay? And here's my story. I got these 3 plants sort of in one rectangular container from my mom's house. And it was very compact, very tight, and the container was made of concrete, cement, something like that. And so I look at it, obviously no drainage holes, and I'm like, what the heck? Red flag. How are these going to thrive? Like, why are people buying these? Do they just buy it because it says crazy plant lady on the side? I guess, probably, whatever. Anyway, I took them all out. Even though they're very delicate, I was very careful and I tried to transplant them, and lo and behold, they've all done exceptionally well. Here's the most interesting thing. This flowering one was in a bright south-facing window when it budded. So I was like, oh, I'll try and put one in a really bright area, and I'll put the other ones in sort of different indirect bright areas and see how they do. The other ones haven't even shown any signs of flowering yet, and this one's flowered right away. Now it's March, so it's not as scorching as it could be, but it was just something really interesting that I found. Most people are like, no, don't put them in bright direct sunlight. And you know what? This is kind of my favorite thing about having plants, houseplants, garden plants, whatever. There's so many things that can happen, and there's so many ways that plants can grow and adapt. I don't even think there are any plant experts, okay? Just plant lovers. So this one didn't really grow evenly because I didn't rotate it. So you can see there's some longer ones here. It's because they were reaching out towards the light, towards the south side of my house. And this doesn't bother me. Uneven growth doesn't bother me, but some people really like to rotate their African violets to keep the rosette even. This one I must have rotated when I was watering because it's much more even, and the stems are starting to reach a little bit, and that will happen. If you look at your African violet and you find that the stems are getting kind of leggy, probably needs more light. You can see on this close-up that my flowering one really compact, really loaded the soil because it is getting tons of light and doesn't need to reach for any. It's just being met with very nice sunlight. I did bottom water these little guys that were in the bright indirect light because I was worried about not enough light causing too much humidity and waterlogging, but this bright direct sunlight experiment, I watered straight on the soil. And you know what? I even got the leaves wet often, which is a no-no, and it's doing fine. It's doing okay. People will tell you what's right and wrong, but really, everyone's just experiencing their plants. Can we just agree that everyone's just experiencing their plants? Oh, this was my experience. This is what happened to me, and I found this. That's how people should talk about plants, you know? Have a good day. Thanks for watching Plantspeak, where I speak about plants.